Right now, someone from your past is carrying a version of you in their mind, a version that no longer exists. They remember the man who picked up the phone on the first ring, the man who said, "It's okay," before anyone even apologized, the man who walked into every room looking for someone to help, someone to fix, someone to save. They remember him clearly, his voice, his patience, his willingness to absorb anything, any insult, any silence, any betrayal, without ever raising his own voice. They remember how easy he was, how predictable, how controllable. And right now, tonight, wherever they are confused. Because they reached for that man recently, maybe with a text, maybe with a comment, maybe with that familiar tone they always used when they needed something. And they found nothing. Not anger, not coldness, not nothing. The number still works, the body still breathes, the name is still the same. But the man behind it, the one they trained to say yes, the one they shaped into a tool for their comfort, that man is gone. And in his place stands someone they have never met, someone who does not explain, someone who does not react, someone who looks at them the way a stranger looks at a stranger, with polite distance and absolutely no need. That terrifies them. Not because you became cruel. You did not become cruel, but because you became unreachable. And for people who built their entire relationship with you on the assumption that you would always be available, always be soft, always be there, unreachable is the most terrifying thing you could become. Tonight I want to talk about that man, the one they remember. And I want to talk about the one who replaced him. Because the distance between those two men, the old you and the new you, is not measured in time. It is not measured in anger. It is not measured in revenge. It is measured in one thing only: clarity. And clarity, once it arrives, doesn't leave. It doesn't fade. It doesn't soften with time. It settles, like stone. Marcus Aurelius, the last great emperor of Rome, a man who led armies, buried children, and faced betrayal from people he trusted with his life, wrote something in his journal that I want you to hear tonight. He wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." For years, your thoughts were the color of accommodation, of compliance, of "please tell me what you need and I will become it." Those thoughts dyed your soul a color that was not yours. And now, slowly, painfully, irreversibly, you are washing that color out. What remains underneath is something raw, something unfamiliar, something they were never supposed to see. Stay with me tonight, because this is not a motivational speech. This is a funeral and a birth. We are burying the man they remember, and we are meeting, perhaps for the first time, the man who took his place. Let me describe him to you. The old you, not from the outside, from the inside. Because from the outside, he looked fine. He looked strong, even. He looked like the kind of man everyone wanted in their life. But from the inside, from the place where no one was allowed to look, he was drowning. Every morning, before his feet touched the floor, his first thought wasn't about himself. It was about them. What do they need today? What mood are they in? What version of me do I need to perform to keep everything smooth? He did not choose this. No one sits down at the age of 8 and says, "I think I will build my entire identity around making other people comfortable." It happens slowly. It happens through repetition. It happens because somewhere, very early, he learned a rule. The rule was simple. If I am good, I will be safe. If I am helpful, I will be loved. If I am quiet, I will not be hurt. That rule worked. For a while. In a chaotic household. In an unpredictable school. in a world that rewarded obedience and punished individuality. That rule kept him alive. But survival strategies have expiration dates. The armor that protects a child suffocates a man. And so the old you carried that rule into adulthood, into friendships, into relationships, and into jobs, into every room he ever walked into. And in every room, the same pattern played out. He would arrive, he would read the room, he would identify who needed what. And then, without being asked, without being thanked, without being seen, he would begin to provide emotional support, patience, forgiveness, labor, time, attention, energy. He poured himself into other people the way water pours into a cracked vessel, endlessly, and endlessly wasted. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius. These were private letters, never meant for public eyes. And in one of them he said something that cuts deep. "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested." And the old you, the man they remember, he did not invest his life. He donated it to people who never asked for donations and never appreciated them, to causes that were not his, to emergencies that were not emergencies, to people who had the ability to help themselves but chose not to, because he was easier. He was always easier. Let me tell you something specific about the old you, something you might not want to hear. He was addicted to being needed, not in the way someone is addicted to a substance, in a quieter way, in the way a man is addicted to the only source of value he has ever known. Because if he was needed, he was not alone. If he was useful, he mattered. If he was the one everyone called, then his existence had a purpose. And without that, without the phone calls, without the emergencies, without the never-ending stream of other people's problems, he did not know who he was. That is the part no one talks about. The old you was not just kind. He was kind because he did not know how to exist without being kind. His kindness was not a choice. It was a dependency. It was the only identity he had. Remove the helping, and what was left? Remove the forgiving, and who was he? Remove the patience, the understanding, the always being there, and what remained? He did not know, and that terrified him more than anything, more than the pain, more than the disrespect, more than the loneliness, the terror of being nothing without someone to save. Epictetus, a man who was born into slavery, to whose own body was broken by his master, said something about this that took me years to truly hear. No man is free who is not master of himself. And the old you wasn't free. He was chained, not by anyone else's cruelty, although there was cruelty. He was chained by his own belief that his value depended on his usefulness. That belief was the real cage, not them, not their behavior, not their words. His own belief about what made him worthy of love. And that belief, that specific, quiet, poisonous belief, ran his entire life. Every decision, every relationship, every sacrifice, every sleepless night spent worrying about someone who was sleeping peacefully because they knew he would handle everything. That man, the man who said yes to everything, he wasn't weak. I want to be absolutely clear about that. He wasn't weak. It takes enormous strength to carry other people's weight, year after year after year. But strength without direction is just endurance, and endurance without boundaries is just slow self-destruction. He endured, for years, for decades perhaps, and then one day, one ordinary, unremarkable day, he stopped. Not because he planned to, not because he read a book or watched a video or had a revelation. He stopped because he could not physically, emotionally, or spiritually continue. The well was dry. And that is where the old you ended. Not with a dramatic exit. Not with a confrontation. Not with a speech. He ended with silence. The kind of silence that is so total, so complete, that the people who depended on his noise, his constant availability, his constant warmth, his constant willingness to absorb, they felt it like a power outage. One day, the lights were on. The next day, they were off. And they have been standing in the dark ever since, wondering what happened. Let me tell you what happened. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something first. Something about them. The people who benefited from the old you. They were not evil. I know that might surprise you. In a video like this, you might expect me to paint them as villains, narcissists, manipulators, predators. Some of them were. Let us be honest about that. Some of them knew exactly what they were doing. They saw your kindness, measured it, and decided to use it like a tool. But most of them, most of the people who took from you without giving back, they were not consciously malicious. They were simply comfortable. And comfort, when it is provided without cost, becomes invisible. Like air, like gravity, like the ground beneath your feet. You do not thank the ground for holding you up. You do not notice air until it is gone. And that is what you became. Air. Ground. The invisible foundation upon which other people built their comfort. But here is the part that matters. They trained you. Not in a formal sense, not with instructions, but through a system of rewards and punishments so subtle that you did not recognize it was happening. When you said yes, when you dropped everything, when you showed up, when you absorbed their mood, when you solved their problem, they rewarded you. Not with gratitude, not with acknowledgement, with something more addictive, with the absence of conflict. When you complied, things were smooth. When you gave, things were peaceful. When you performed your role, the helper, the listener, the fixer, the forgiver, the system functioned. No arguments, no tension, no uncomfortable silences. But when you said no, even once, even gently, even with a reasonable explanation, the punishment was immediate. Withdrawal, coldness, a shift in tone so small that most people would not notice, but you noticed because you had spent your entire life calibrating your behavior to avoid exactly that shift. A sigh, a pause before answering, a text left on read for 3 hours, a comment at dinner designed to remind you of your role. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, that is abuse. Nothing that would hold up in a conversation with a friend. Just a chill, a micro-adjustment in their warmth, a tiny reduction in their availability, enough to make you feel, deep in your chest, that you had done something wrong. And so you corrected. You apologized. You over-explained. You went back to saying yes. The system reset. This happened hundreds of times, thousands of times, over years, over decades. And each time, the invisible walls around your identity grew a little thicker. The cage became a little more solid. Your capacity to say no, to have needs, to have opinions, to have a self that existed independently of their comfort, shrank. Until one day you looked in the mirror and did not recognize the man looking back. Not because he had changed, but because he had been erased. Layer by layer. Accommodation by accommodation. Yes by yes. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 5 of the Meditations, "How much time he saves who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only to what he does himself, that it may be just and pure." And the old you spent his entire life looking at what his neighbor said and did and thought, not out of curiosity, out of survival, because his entire emotional ecosystem depended on their mood, When they were happy, he was allowed to relax. When they were upset, he went into service mode. When they were distant, he panicked and doubled his efforts. He was not living his own life. He was orbiting theirs, like a moon that has no light of its own. That only reflects whatever light falls on it. That only exists in relation to the planet it circles. So on the planet, the person at the center of his orbit did not even notice he was there. Not as a person, as a function, as a service, as a feature of their environment that they would only notice if it suddenly disappeared. This is what I mean by trained. You were trained to believe that your needs were secondary, that your feelings were inconvenient, that your anger was unacceptable, that your boundaries were selfishness. You were trained to believe that the highest version of you, the best version, the most admirable version, was the version that gave everything and asked for nothing. And you believed it, deeply, completely, without question, because the training started before you had the language to question it. Seneca wrote, and I need you to hear this carefully, "We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgment about them. And your judgment, your deeply trained, deeply conditioned judgment, was that you deserved what you received, that their distance was your fault, that their cruelty was a response to your inadequacy, that if you had just been more patient, more understanding, more available, more selfless, they would have finally seen you. They saw you. They always saw you. They saw a man with no fence around his garden, and they picked every flower he grew, not because they valued the flowers, because the gate was open. And when the garden was bare, when there was nothing left to pick, they looked at the empty soil and said, 'Why is this garden so empty?' As if they had not been the ones who stripped it bare. Epictetus said, 'If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone.' There is dark humor in that line, but there is also a blade, because Epictetus is saying something radical. He is saying, stop performing for their judgment. Their opinion of you is built on incomplete information. It always was. They judged you as weak because they only saw the part of you that served them. They never saw the part that lay awake at 3 a.m, chest tight, wondering why their affection had to be earned, but their cruelty came for free. They never saw that part, because you hid it, because the training taught you that vulnerability was burden, that your pain was a problem to be managed privately, that the highest form of strength was silent suffering, and so you suffered silently, for years, until the silence broke. I want to talk about a specific night, not a date on a calendar, not an event you could describe in a police report or a diary entry, but a night you remember with your body more than your mind. A night when something inside you shifted so fundamentally that the person who woke up the next morning was not the same person who went to sleep. For some of you, it happened after a betrayal, the kind that does not come from an enemy, because enemies are expected to hurt you, but from someone you trusted completely, someone you would have defended with your last breath, someone who knew exactly where your wounds were because you showed them openly, believing they would never use that knowledge as a weapon. They did. For some of you, it happened after a silence, not their silence, your silence. The moment when you realized you had stopped speaking, not because you had nothing to say, but because you had learned that nothing you said would change anything, that your words entered their ears and dissolved into nothing, like rain into sand. For some of you, it happened after a mirror, a real mirror, in a bathroom, at 2 a.m, when you looked at your own face and could not connect it to any feeling. Not sadness, not anger, not even numbness, just blankness, the complete absence of the man you thought you were. That was the night the old you died. And I want you to understand what that death actually was. Because it was not dramatic. It was not a breakdown. Although it may have looked like one from the outside. It was not a decision, although decisions followed. It was a collapse of a belief system. The belief that said, if I am kind enough, I will be safe. The belief that said, if I give enough, I will be loved. The belief that said, if I endure enough, things will get better. The belief that said, I am responsible for their feelings. The belief that said, my needs are less important than their comfort. Every single one of those beliefs, every single one, collapsed simultaneously, like a building with its foundations removed, like a bridge with its cables cut. One moment the structure was standing. The next moment, it was rubble. And you stood in that rubble, alone, in the dark, at 2 a.m, or 3, or 4. It does not matter what time it was. What matters is that you stood there, and for the first time in your life, you had no script, no role to play, no performance to deliver, no mood to manage, no person to prioritize. Just you, and the rubble, and the silence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and I believe he wrote this from a similar place, a place of total disillusionment. He wrote, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. And standing in that rubble, you realize the terrifying implication of that line. If happiness is within yourself, if it has been within yourself all along, then every year you spent searching for it in other people's approval was a year wasted. Every sacrifice you made to earn their love was a sacrifice made to a God that does not exist. The God of reciprocity. The God of fairness. The God that says, the world gives back what you put in. That God is dead. The world does not give back what you put in. The world gives back what you allow. And you allowed everything. Seneca wrote, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. And that night, that specific night when the old you died, you stopped being frightened. Not because you became brave in the traditional sense, but because the thing you had been most afraid of, being alone, being unsupported, being without their approval, had already happened. It was already real, and you were still breathing. That is the moment fear loses its power. When the thing you feared most arrives, and you survive it. You survived it. The old you did not. The old you died in that rubble. But you, the real you, the one who had been buried under years of compliance and performance, you stood up. Not immediately. Not that night. Maybe not that week. But slowly, like a man pulling himself from wreckage, you stood up. And when you stood up, you noticed something strange. The world looked different. Not brighter, not darker, just clearer. Like someone had removed a filter you did not know was there. The filter of other people's expectations. The filter of, what will they think? The filter of, how will this affect them? Without that filter, the world was simpler. Harsher, perhaps. Lonelier, certainly. But simpler. Because without the filter, the questions became simpler too. What do I want? What do I need? What will I accept? What will I refuse? Not, what do they want? Not, what will make them comfortable? Not, what is the least disruptive option? What do I want? You had never asked yourself that question, not honestly, not without immediately correcting it with, but what about? There was no, "but what about" anymore. The people who used to fill in that blank, they were not standing in the rubble with you. They were asleep in their beds, comfortable, unaware that the man they had been depending on had just ceased to exist. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." And for the first time in your life, standing in the rubble of your own collapsed belief system, you said to yourself what you would be. Not what they wanted you to be, what you would be. And the answer was simple. I will be a man who does not betray himself to keep other people comfortable. That is it. That is the entire answer. Everything that followed, every change, every silence, every walked away from conversation, every unreturned phone call, every boundary drawn in stone. All of it came from that single decision. I will not betray myself anymore. And the old you, the one who betrayed himself every day for years, who handed over pieces of his soul like change from a pocket. That man heard the decision and knew it was his death sentence. He did not fight it. He was too tired to fight. He had been carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations for so long that when the decision came to put that weight down, he simply let go and fell and did not get back up. The old you is dead. Let him rest. Now let me tell you about the man who showed up the next morning. He did not announce himself. There was no moment of triumph, no dramatic speech in front of a mirror, no fist pumping, no teeth gritting, no war cry. He just opened his eyes. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, his first thought wasn't about them. It was about himself. What do I need today? Not what do they need. Not what fires do I need to put out. Not whose mood do I need to manage. What do I need? The answer was small. Coffee. Silence. A walk. Nothing dramatic. Nothing transformative. Just himself, his own company, his own thoughts, his own time. And that tiny, invisible shift was the earthquake. Because the old you never started a day with himself. The old you started every day with an inventory of other people's needs. The old you opened his eyes and immediately scanned for problems that were not his to solve. The new you opened his eyes and said, "I am here. That is enough for now." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive. To breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." And for the first time, you actually felt that, not as a platitude, not as something you read on a wall, as a physical experience. The privilege of being alive without the immediate obligation to justify that privilege through service to others. You drank your coffee, slowly, without checking your phone, without wondering who needed what, without rehearsing conversations that had not happened yet. You just sat there, and the silence was not empty. It was full of you. I'm full of a presence that had been absent for years because every room you walked into was already occupied by someone else's needs. This is what replaced the old you. Not anger, not bitterness, not a desire for revenge. Presence. The simple, radical act of being present in your own life. But let me be more specific, because presence alone is not transformation. Presence is just the foundation. What you built on that foundation, that is the transformation. The first thing you built was discernment. The old you treated everyone equally. Every person who asked for help received help. Every person who asked for time received time. Every person who asked for forgiveness received forgiveness. No questions, no evaluation, no criteria. The new you evaluates, not with cruelty, not with suspicion, with calm, clear-eyed assessment. So has this person earned my trust? Not demanded it, earned it, through consistent behavior over time. Has this person shown reciprocity? Not once. Not when it was convenient. As a pattern. Has this person respected my boundaries in the past? Or have they treated my boundaries as suggestions, things to be negotiated, tested, or ignored? These are not cold questions. They are survival questions. They are the questions a man asks when he has learned. Through pain, through loss, through the death of the version of himself who never asked these questions, that his energy, his time, and his emotional capacity are finite resources. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those who you are capable of improving." That line has a filter built into it, a criteria. Not everyone gets in. Not everyone qualifies. Some people improve you. Some people drain you. And the wise man, the rebuilt man, knows the difference. The second thing you built was silence, not the old silence. The old silence was suppression. It was the silence of a man who had something to say, but was afraid of the consequences of saying it. It was the silence of compliance. The new silence is different. The new silence is the silence of a man who has nothing to prove, who does not need to explain his decisions, who does not need to justify his boundaries, who does not need to win arguments, because he has realized that most arguments are not about truth, they are about control, and he is done being controlled. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And that is precisely what the new you does. And he does not announce his changes. He does not give speeches about his transformation. He does not post about his growth. He simply lives differently. And the people around him, the ones who knew the old version, they notice. Not because he told them to notice, because the change is visible in his posture, in his eye contact, in the way he answers questions, briefly, directly, without the old habit of over-explaining to make sure no one is upset, in the way he says no. That single word, no, used to be the hardest word in his vocabulary. Every no felt like a betrayal. Every no triggered a cascade of guilt, anxiety, and the deep, conditioned fear that saying no meant being abandoned. The new you says no like he is stating a fact, like he is telling someone the time. No. No explanation. No apology. No negotiation. Just no. And the first time someone hears it, someone who has known you for years, someone who has never heard that word from you in that tone, the look on their face tells you everything you need to know about the relationship. If they look confused but curious, they might be worth keeping. If they look offended, they were only there for what you provided. The third thing you built was a standard. The old you had no standard for how he would be treated. Or rather, his standard was, whatever they give me is what I deserve. The new you has a standard written in stone. I will not be spoken to with contempt. I will not be the only one making effort. I will not be available to people who are only available when they need something. I will not sacrifice my peace for someone else's comfort. I will not apologize for having needs. Well, these are not aggressive statements. They are not threats. They are the minimum requirements for access to your life, the door fee, the baseline. And anyone who cannot meet that baseline, regardless of history, regardless of blood, regardless of how long they have been in your life, does not get through the door. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And the quality of your thoughts has changed. They are no longer polluted with self-doubt, with people-pleasing calculations, with the constant low-level anxiety of wondering whether you are enough. You are enough, not because you earned it, not because you proved it, not because someone finally told you, because it was always true. You just could not see it through the fog of everyone else's expectations. The fog is gone now, and what you see, clearly for the first time, is a man who does not need to be needed to know his own worth. That man is dangerous. Not in the way they fear, not with fists or anger or revenge. Dangerous in the way that truth is dangerous to a lie, in the way that light is dangerous to a shadow, in the way that freedom is dangerous to a cage. The cage still exists. The bars are still there. But you walked out, and you are not going back. Let us talk about your silence, because your silence is the thing they cannot handle, not your anger. They could handle your anger. Anger is familiar. Anger is predictable. Anger gives them something to work with, a reaction to interpret, a weakness to exploit, an emotion to redirect. When you were angry, they could say, "See? He is the problem. He is the emotional one. He is the one who needs to calm down." Your anger validated their narrative. It made you the villain. It let them rearrange the story so that your pain was your fault and their behavior was justified. But your silence destroys the narrative, because silence has no edges to grab. Silence has no words to twist. Silence does not defend itself, does not explain itself, does not give them the material they need to build their case against you. Silence just is, and in the face of it, they are left with nothing but their own thoughts, their own behavior, their own choices, reflected back at them in the absence of your noise. That is why they hate your silence more than they ever hated your anger. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." But I want to expand on that tonight, because your silence is not an answer to anger. Your silence is an answer to everything. To manipulation, silence. To guilt-tripping, silence. To the passive-aggressive comment designed to provoke a reaction, silence. To the sudden warmth that appears when they realize you are slipping away, silence. To the text that says, "I miss the old you," silence. Because what does that text actually mean? I miss the old you. Let us translate it honestly. It means, I miss the version of you that I could predict. I miss the version of you that made my life easier. I miss the version of you that absorbed my worst behavior without consequence. They do not miss you. They miss your function. And your silence communicates something that no words could communicate as clearly. That function has been discontinued. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future." And your silence is the purest form of enjoying the present. Because in your silence, you are not worrying about their reaction. You are not calculating your next response. You are not running simulations of how this conversation might go. You are just here, present, undisturbed. And they can see it. That is the worst part for them. They can see that you are not suffering. They can see that your silence is not the silence of a man who is hurt and hiding it. It is the silence of a man who is at peace, and peace, genuine, unperformative peace, in a man who was previously in constant emotional turmoil. That is the most disorienting thing they have ever witnessed, because it means their power is gone. And let me explain what I mean by their power. Their power was never physical. It was never financial. It was never based on any concrete advantage they had over you. Their power was your reaction. As long as you reacted, as long as you argued, explained, defended, apologized, pursued, worried, they had power. Because your reaction proved that they mattered, that they had influence, that they could press a button inside you and produce a predictable outcome. Your silence unplugs the button, and a button that does not work is not a button anymore. It is just a piece of plastic. It is just a dead switch on a machine that has been rewired. You have been rewired. Not by them. Not in spite of them. Because of what they did to you. Because every time they pressed that button and got a reaction, and they were unknowingly teaching you which wires needed to be cut. And now they are cut. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And you have mastered your reaction, not by suppressing it, not by pretending you do not feel, but by choosing, consciously, deliberately, what deserves your energy and what does not. They do not deserve your energy anymore, not because they are bad people, although some of them are, but because the cost of giving them your energy is higher than the return. It is a bad investment, and you have stopped making bad investments. There is a specific moment I want you to notice, a moment that will happen, or has already happened, that will confirm everything I'm saying. It is the moment when someone who used to control your emotional state tries their old technique, and you feel nothing, not numbness. Numbness is the absence of feeling. This is different. This is the presence of clarity where chaos used to live. They say something designed to provoke you, and instead of the old fire, the rush of adrenaline, the tightness in your chest, the desperate need to defend yourself, you feel stillness, a deep, immovable stillness. And in that stillness, you watch their words like a man watching weather through a window. Interesting. Temporary. Unable to reach you. That moment, that specific moment, is proof that the old you is dead, and the new you is real. They will try harder after that moment, because the failure of their technique will panic them. They will escalate. They will try guilt. They will try nostalgia. They will try intimacy. They will try anger. They will try all of the tools that used to work. None of them will work. Because the man those tools were designed for no longer exists. And the man standing in his place, the one with the stillness, with the silence, with the eyes that see clearly now, that man does not have a button to press. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." You realized it. And now, you are the strongest person in every room you walk into, not because you are the loudest, not because you are the most aggressive, because you are the most free. And freedom, real freedom, earned through pain and built on the grave of a dead self, is the most powerful force a man can carry. They feel it when you walk in. They just do not know what it is. They call you cold now. They use that word, cold, as if it is an accusation. As if warmth was a debt you owed, and you have defaulted on the payment. You have changed. You are not the same person. I do not recognize you anymore. You have become cold. Let me tell you what those sentences actually mean. You have changed means you have stopped behaving in the way that was convenient for me. You are not the same person means the version of you that I could control has been replaced by someone I cannot control. I do not recognize you anymore means the mask I was comfortable with has been removed, and I do not know how to interact with the face underneath. You have become cold means you have stopped prioritizing my comfort over your own well-being, and I am interpreting your self-respect as rejection. That is what cold means when they say it. It does not mean what the word actually means. You are not cold. Cold is the absence of feeling. Cold is indifference born from emptiness. What you have is not coldness. What you have is selectivity. You have become selective about who receives your warmth. And the people who used to receive it for free, without earning it, without reciprocating it, without even acknowledging it, Those people are now standing outside the circle of your warmth, and they are interpreting the chill as cruelty. It is not cruelty. It is consequence. Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." And I want to adapt that for your situation. What they are experiencing is not coldness, and it is what happens when exploitation meets consequence. They exploited your warmth. They had unlimited access to a man who would forgive anything, tolerate anything, absorb anything. And they used that access carelessly. They used it the way someone uses a public resource, without gratitude, without maintenance, without the understanding that it could run out. It ran out. Not because you are cruel, because you are finite, because your warmth was never infinite. It only appeared infinite, because you kept drawing from reserves you did not have, kept burning fuel you could not replace, kept giving from an account that was overdrawn years ago. And now the account is closed, not temporarily. Not until you calm down or come to your senses or stop being dramatic. Permanently. That account, the unlimited, unconditional, a no questions asked warmth account, is closed forever. It will never reopen. Not for them. Not for anyone. What replaced it is a new account, a selective account, an account with terms and conditions, an account that requires a deposit before it allows a withdrawal. And the deposit is simple: respect, reciprocity, and consistency. 3 things the old account never required. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 6, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and you are not like them. You are not withdrawing your warmth as punishment. You are not going cold to hurt them. You are not playing a game. You are simply applying the same principle to your emotional life that any rational person applies to their financial life. You do not invest in things that consistently lose value. They consistently lost value. And every kindness you gave depreciated the moment it was received. Every sacrifice you made was forgotten before the day was over. Every boundary you tried to set was negotiated, tested, and eventually demolished. Your warmth was a currency they spent without earning. And you have stopped printing money. Let me address something directly. Because I know some of you are struggling with this. You feel guilty. Even now, even after everything they did, even after the betrayals and the silences and the years of being taken for granted, you feel guilty for protecting yourself. That guilt is not yours. I need you to hear that clearly. That guilt was installed in you. It was installed by the same system that trained you to say yes. It is the alarm that goes off when you step outside the role they assigned you. It is the electric fence around the cage, invisible but painful enough to keep you inside. And every time you feel it, every time the guilt rises in your chest when you do not answer their call, when you do not respond to their text, when you do not show up to the event they expected you at, I want you to recognize it for what it is. It is not your conscience. It is their programming. And you are deactivating it. Line by line, day by day, silence by silence. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." And your wants have been refined. You no longer want their approval. You no longer want to be the person everyone calls. You no longer want to be needed so badly that you lose yourself in the needing. You want peace. You want truth. Now you want to wake up in the morning and feel your own presence before you feel anyone else's expectations. And those wants, simple, clean, honest wants, are worth more than every relationship you lost by claiming them. They call you cold. Let them. Cold is what warmth looks like when it finally has standards. I want to talk about what you are building now. In the silence, in the solitude, in the hours that used to be spent managing other people's emotions. You are building a life, not the life they wanted you to have, not the life that was convenient for their plans, not the life that kept you small enough to be useful without ever being threatening. Your life, a life that belongs entirely to you, and that life looks different from the outside than it does from the inside. From the outside, it looks like isolation. It looks like withdrawal. It looks like a man who has retreated from the world. But from the inside, from where you stand, it looks like architecture. You are building something, carefully, deliberately, with materials that cannot be corrupted by the wrong hands. The first thing you are building is your body, not for them, not to look good, not to make someone regret losing you, for yourself, because the old you neglected his body the way he neglected his boundaries. He was too busy carrying other people's weight to carry his own, too busy making sure everyone else was fed to feed himself, too busy managing everyone else's health to manage his own. And now, in the silence, you move, you lift, you run, you stretch. You feed yourself well, not as punishment, not as obsession, as respect, as the physical expression of a decision you made on the night the old you died. I will not neglect myself anymore. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." And be good starts with being good to yourself. Not in the indulgent sense, in the structural sense. Your body is the house you live in, and you have been letting the roof leak for years because you were too busy fixing other people's plumbing. The roof is being repaired now. The second thing you are building is your mind. The old you read what other people recommended, watched what other people watched, formed opinions that were designed to be agreeable rather than honest. The new you reads what interests him, studies what challenges him, and forms opinions that are his own, even if they are unpopular, even if they create discomfort, even if the people around him would prefer he kept thinking the way he used to think, the way that was compatible with their worldview, the way that did not threaten their assumptions. Seneca wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable," and your mind is no longer anxious about future events because you have stopped building your future on the unstable foundation of other people's behavior. You are building on the only foundation that cannot be taken from you, your own discipline, your own standards, your own understanding of what matters. The third thing you are building is your financial life. I know this seems disconnected from philosophy, but it is not, because financial dependency is the last chain, the final way they keep you. The old you was not strategic about money, not because he was foolish, because he was too emotionally occupied to think clearly about resources. His energy went into managing relationships, not managing wealth. His time went into fixing other people's problems, not building his own security. The new you understands that financial independence is emotional independence, that a man who does not need their money, their housing, their support, their resources, that man is truly free, because his freedom is not contingent on anyone's generosity. It is built on his own effort. And so, in the silence, you work, you save, you invest, you build skills that have market value. You create options for yourself that the old you never had, because the old you was too busy creating options for everyone else. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And money, strategically accumulated, wisely managed, is one of the tools of freedom. Not the purpose, the tool. The fourth thing you are building is your environment. The old you lived in spaces that reflected other people's preferences. His home was designed for their comfort. His schedule was organized around their needs. His social circle was curated by their approval. The new you designs his own space, literally and figuratively. The books on his shelf are books he chose. The silence in his home is silence he created. The people who enter his space are people who were invited, not people who assumed access. This is what I mean by fortress. Not a fortress of walls and hostility, a fortress of intention. A space where every element has been chosen rather than inherited. Where every relationship has been evaluated rather than assumed. Where every commitment has been made consciously rather than by default. Marcus Aurelius built an entire philosophy while living in a tent on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. He did not need a palace. He did not need luxury. He needed clarity. And clarity can exist in any space, as long as that space belongs to you. Your space belongs to you now, for the first time. And the people who used to walk in without knocking, the people who assumed your door was always open, your time always available, your attention always on call, those people now stand outside. Not because you locked them out, because for the first time there is a door, and the door is closed, and the door has a lock, and the lock requires a key, and the key is earned through respect, through reciprocity, through the slow, patient process of proving that they can be trusted with access to the man you have become. Some of them will earn the key, most will not. And that is fine, because a fortress with 100 open doors is not a fortress. It is a highway. And you are done being a highway. A throughway for other people's needs. A route they take when they need to get somewhere. A path they travel without ever stopping to notice the landscape. You are the landscape now. And the landscape does not apologize for having mountains. Let me talk about your mornings now. Because the mornings are where the new you is forged. Every day. Without exception. Without negotiation. The old you woke up in reaction. His eyes opened, and his nervous system immediately began scanning. What happened while I was asleep? Who needs me? What went wrong? What do I need to fix before the day begins? The new you wakes up in intention. Before the phone, before the screen. Before any voice from outside enters his head. He sits with himself, in silence, for 5 minutes, or 10, or 30. However long it takes to feel his own presence before the world demands his attention. And in that silence, he asks 3 questions. What do I want today? What will I tolerate today? What will I protect today? These are not motivational questions. They are operational ones. They are the daily briefing of a man who has learned that the world will take whatever he does not actively protect. Marcus Aurelius performed this exact practice every morning in a tent, out in the cold, while an empire waited for his decisions. Before anything else, he sat with his own mind and prepared it for the day. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." And then, immediately after that gratitude, he prepared for reality. The people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Not as pessimism, as preparation. The old you was blindsided by bad behavior because he expected good behavior from everyone. He assumed the best. He gave the benefit of the doubt. He walked into every room believing that today would be different, that they would be different, that his kindness would finally be reciprocated. It never was. The new you expects reality, and reality includes difficult people, broken promises, and the constant low-level selfishness of a world that is primarily interested in its own comfort. That is not cynicism. That is clarity. And clarity prepares you. Cynicism embitters you. There is a difference. The morning practice continues after the questions. The new you moves his body, not for vanity, for discipline, because the body and the mind are not separate things. A man who cannot govern his body cannot govern his reactions. A man who cannot push through physical discomfort cannot push through emotional discomfort. And a man who starts his day by doing something difficult, deliberately, voluntarily, has already proven to himself that he is capable of difficulty before the world tests him. Seneca took cold baths. Marcus Aurelius trained with soldiers. Epictetus walked with a limp caused by a broken leg and never once used it as an excuse. Physical discipline is the first proof, the daily, renewable proof, that you are not the old you. That the man who avoided discomfort, who sought the path of least resistance, who chose comfort over growth, that man is gone. The man who remains chooses difficulty, on purpose, every morning. After the body, the new you feeds his mind, not with social media, not with news, not with the opinions of strangers, with ideas, with philosophy, with the hard, uncomfortable, challenging thoughts of men who faced worse than you and found a way through. The new you reads Seneca's letters the way the old you checked messages, as the first intellectual act of the day. He reads Marcus Aurelius the way the old you read texts, slowly, carefully. I'm looking for meaning in every line. This is not academic. This is practical. This is survival. Because the mind that is not deliberately fed will feed on whatever is available. And what is available, in this culture, in this time, in this ocean of noise, is mostly garbage, outrage, comparison, envy, fear. The disciplined mind eats before the world can feed it poison. Epictetus said, "You become what you give your attention to. If you yourself don't choose what thoughts and images you expose yourself to, someone else will." And the old you let everyone else choose. His thoughts were shaped by their moods. His feelings were shaped by their words. His self-image was shaped by their opinions. The new you chooses his own inputs, books he selected, ideas he earned through effort, conversations with people who challenge him rather than comfort him. And at the end of the day, at night, before sleep, the new you performs one final practice. The evening review. This comes directly from Seneca. Every night, he would sit with himself and ask, "What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? What will I do differently tomorrow?" Not with judgment, not with the old habit of beating himself up for every imperfection, with the clinical calm of a man who is improving by 1% per day and knows that 1%, compounded over months and years, is a revolution. You do not need to transform overnight. You need to transform consistently. One better decision per day. One boundary held. One moment of silence where the old you would have spoken. One time saying no where the old you would have said yes. Some 365 of those tiny victories per year. In 5 years, the man standing in your place will be unrecognizable. Not because he changed suddenly, because he changed relentlessly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." And that is the final discipline. Tolerance for the imperfections of the world, strictness for your own standards. Not their standards, your standards. The ones you wrote on the night the old you died. The ones that said, "I will not betray myself. I will not perform for their comfort. I will not be available to people who are unavailable to me." Those standards, maintained daily, enforced quietly, practiced without announcement, are the bricks of the fortress. And every morning you wake up and practice them, you lay another brick. The fortress grows. And now they watch. From a distance, through the windows of social media, through mutual friends, through the occasional encounter, the kind of encounter that used to end with you giving them everything and leaving with nothing. They watch, and they do not understand what they are seeing, because what they are seeing does not match the man they remember. The man they remember was anxious. The man standing in front of them is calm. The man they remember was eager to please. The man standing in front of them is indifferent to their opinion. The man they remember would have asked how they were doing, would have listened for an hour, would have offered help before being asked. The man standing in front of them says hello, keeps his hands in his pockets, and seems perfectly content with a conversation that lasts 90 seconds. They search your face for the old softness. It is not there. They search your eyes for the old desperation. It is not there. They search your voice for the old eagerness, the slight tremor that used to appear when you were trying too hard to be liked. It is not there. What is there instead is something they have no category for. Calm, self-contained, complete, not performing strength, not pretending confidence, not putting on a show, just whole and wholeness, in a man they knew as fragmented, as scattered across a dozen other people's needs. Wholeness is disorienting. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." And the insanity was the old you who gave everything and had nothing, the old you who measured his worth by how much he could sacrifice, the old you who lived his entire life as a reaction to other people's actions. The new you is not a reaction. The new you is an action, a deliberate, chosen, self-directed action. And they can feel the difference. Let me tell you what happens next, because I have watched this pattern play out hundreds of times, in letters from Seneca, in the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, in the lives of ordinary men who went through this same transformation. Some of them will try to pull you back. They will use nostalgia. Remember when you were the man who dropped everything for me. Remember when you were the man who answered on the first ring. Remember when you were the man who forgave anything. They want to remind you of the old you. Because the old you was comfortable for them. The old you was predictable. The old you asked for nothing and gave everything. When nostalgia fails, they will try guilt. I was there for you when no one else was. I was there for you when you needed me. We have history. This is transactional guilt. It reframes the relationship as a debt you owe rather than a choice you make. It says, because I gave you something once, you are obligated to give me access forever. You are not. A gift that comes with permanent strings was never a gift. It was a deposit on a debt they planned to collect at a time of their choosing. When guilt fails, they will try rewriting history. You were never that kind. You always had a temper. You are the one who changed, not me. I never did anything to you. This is the most dangerous one, because it attacks your memory. It makes you question whether your experience was real, whether you are being fair, whether maybe, just maybe, you are the problem after all. You are not the problem. Your experience was real. Your pain was real. Your years of giving without receiving were real. And no amount of revisionist history can erase what you lived through. Seneca wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." And your mind is unconquerable now, not because it is invulnerable, but because it has been tested. It has been through the fire. It has been broken and rebuilt with better materials. They cannot rewrite your history because you remember it clearly, not with anger, with clarity. The same clarity that killed the old you and built the new one. And when all of their techniques fail, nostalgia, guilt, revision, they arrive at the final stage. Acceptance. Not all of them will reach this stage. Some will stay angry. Some will stay confused. Some will tell a version of your story that paints you as the villain and them as the victim, and they will tell it to anyone who will listen. Let them. Their version of you is not your responsibility. Your version of you is your responsibility. And your version, the one you are living right now, in this silence, in this discipline, in this fortress of intention, your version is the only one that matters. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. And you are being one, not by their definition, by yours. A good man, a truly good man, is not a man who gives everything to everyone. A good man is a man who gives wisely, who loves honestly, who protects his own peace without apology, and who treats himself with the same kindness he once reserved exclusively for others. That is you now, and they are watching. Let them watch. I want to close with something personal. If I could sit with Marcus Aurelius tonight, in his tent on the frontier, with the fire burning low and the sound of the northern wind outside, and if I could tell him about you, about the man listening to this right now, I believe he would say something like this. I know the weight you carried. I carried it too. The weight of an empire is nothing compared to the weight of performing a version of yourself that was built for other people's comfort. And I ruled 60 million people. I commanded legions. I made decisions that shaped the future of civilizations. And still, there were nights when I sat alone in my tent and wondered if the man I was showing the world had anything to do with the man I actually was. I wrote my meditations not for you, but for myself, as a reminder, as a daily exercise in honesty. Because the world does not reward honesty. The world rewards performance, and the temptation to perform, to be the emperor they needed rather than the man I was, that temptation never fully disappeared. But I fought it, every day, with these words, with these practices, with the relentless, unglamorous work of being honest with myself, about myself. And that is what you are doing now. You are being honest, perhaps for the first time, and you are admitting that the old you was not who you are, that the performance is over, that the audience has been dismissed. Do not mourn him. The old you served his purpose. He kept you alive during a time when you did not have the tools to do anything else. He was a survival mechanism, and he survived. But survival is not living, and you are ready to live now. The people who cannot understand your transformation, that is their limitation, not yours. The people who call you cold, who accuse you of changing, who search for the man they remember, they are looking for a ghost, and ghosts cannot be found in the living. You are living now, not performing, not accommodating, not reacting. Living. And that, in a world full of men who are still performing, still accommodating, still reacting, that makes you rare. And rare things are not understood by common eyes. Do not shrink yourself to be understood. Stand at your full height and let them look up. They will adjust. Or they will not. Either way, you remain. I wish I could have met you. I wish I could have sat across from you and told you directly what I wrote alone in the dark. But the fact that my words reached you, across 2,000 years, across languages, across the vast distance between my fire and your screen, that tells me something. It tells me that truth does not expire, that wisdom does not decay, that the man who wrestles with himself in the dark will always find company in the writings of those who wrestled before him. You are not alone in this. You were never alone in this. Or you simply could not hear us over the noise of their demands. That is what I believe Marcus Aurelius would say. Not because I can read his mind, but because everything he wrote points in the same direction, toward the man who chooses himself, not out of selfishness, but out of the hard-won understanding that a man who does not choose himself has nothing real to offer anyone else. Seneca echoed this. No man can live happily who regards himself alone, who turns everything to his own advantage. You must live for another if you would live for yourself. But notice the order. You must live for yourself first, not instead of others. Before others, because a man who has not secured his own oxygen cannot help anyone breathe. And Epictetus, the former slave who became freer than any emperor, said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." And what you have, right now, tonight, in this moment, is yourself. Unperformed, unedited, uncorrupted by the expectations of people who never earned the right to shape you. You have yourself, and that is more than the old you ever had. So here is where we end, not with a shout, not with a battle cry, not with a promise that the world will suddenly become fair or that the people who hurt you will suddenly understand. Here is the truth, spoken quietly, the way truth prefers to be spoken. The man they remember is dead. He died on a night that only you know about, in a way that only you understand, for reasons that you do not owe to anyone. And what took his place is not a colder man, not a harder man, not a man who has lost his ability to love. What took his place is a man who loves honestly, who gives wisely, who stays only where he is valued, who leaves without explanation when he is not, who measures his worth not by how much he can sacrifice, but by how clearly he can see. That man, the one listening right now, that man cannot be controlled. Not because he is above anyone, not because he has transcended human emotion, not because he has become some unfeeling machine, but because he has finally, after years of performing for an audience that never clapped, become himself. And himself is enough. It was always enough. They just convinced you otherwise, and you believed them for a long time. You do not believe them anymore. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. You are one, not their version, yours. Good night." And tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes, remember, the first thought belongs to you, not to them. It has always belonged to you. You just forgot. You remember now.